This is the September 18, 2020 Harbor Management Commission Plan Update Committee meeting. In attendance are Jack Hirschler, Mary Von Kanta, Jeff Stedman, Kim Taylor, and because of COVID, we can't take public comment. However, any members of public who are interesting and wish to send comments, please do so and send them to hmc@fairfieldct.org and put Plan Update Committee 9/18/20 meeting in the subject line. And we, of course, need your name and address with your comment. We will include your comments in the minutes, but will not with your name, but will not include your email address. Thank you. Okay, committee. The first item on our agenda is to take a look at the Jeff's draft questionnaire, which I thought was terrific. I guess the easiest way to do it is probably just start at the top and go through it. Would you find that most helpful, Jeff? Just page by page?
Yeah. However, I guess the unanswered question is how would people respond to this, or whatever we decide is the final version. Is there a way for them to type directly into a form, or do they have to print it out and scan it and mail it, or and that's why the appearance of it, with the one page for each question. If it was set up so you could type into a box in your, I actually just did that today. I was responding to a state agency, and there was a box, and I could type in my question. But I don't know. Well, anyway, that's.
Why don't we start with that? I am helpless and hopeless when it comes to figuring out how to set up type-on forms, or most of the time using type-on forms is maddening.
I'll stop talking in a minute, but I didn't call her yet, Kim, waiting your instructions, but we can simply call Jennifer Carpenter in the First Selectwoman's office, and if there's a way to do this, or if other town departments have done it, she would know, or whether we have to set up some special. Now, I talked with Betty yesterday, and she said that the Conservation Department had done some sort of a survey concerning Lake Mohegan open space area, but she couldn't find a copy of it, and I guess Brian wasn't in to ask how they had done that. But the model that we were looking at from the whatever that plan was, the not the sustainability plan, plan where we took that. But that instruction was, fill in the survey and then attach it to an email and send it back to us, or mail it, which sort of implied you'd have to, well, anyway.
Well, you'd have to print it and scan it.
Yeah, and people don't know how to. Well, I wouldn't.
I was just going to speak up as the oldest person in this committee by light years. That there are a substantial number of people in Fairfield who cannot do those kinds of things with a computer. So very alternate ways of getting their answers back could be offered, including making a copy of it and sending it in. I think they mostly can print out at this point and put your suggestions on the form and mail it to somebody.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was thinking was we simply we assume that there are a lot of people who can fax, who can scan, and we don't worry about them so much, but we set up places in town, the library, I don't know, your yacht yard, the yacht club, and put a stack of surveys and a box next to it.
I had just remembered that the libraries are not really open very much, so that's probably a tricky place right now. But
that's true.
The yacht club shouldn't have a big role in this, I don't think, here. This is a town project.
Kim, I haven't used it before personally, setting them up, but there's a Survey Monkey, which I think is just a website you can go to, and I don't think it costs anything, and it's designed for create your own survey,
Jack, the survey examples that I gave from West Haven and actually all three, New London and Norwich, we set those up on the Survey Monkey.
So it's a free way to do surveys that are not overly complex, and it sounds like that could be a nice fit for this, and it's free. So that might be, if you want to do a web-based one, that would be an easy way to do it probably.
Yeah. I asked Dave Kelly, who's the IT director in town, if we could, a while ago when we first started thinking about this, if we could use the town website. And he said no, they're only set up to answer one question. And I wasn't quite sure what
but I think we could probably send them from the town website to a link to the SurveyMonkey site to do the survey.
Right.
And so basically, for the user's perspective, it feels like they're just doing it from the town.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
But he did say SurveyMonkey came with a cost.
Really?
Yeah, I've been paying $35 a month, I think it is, for the surveys that we were still doing in those other towns.
Okay.
Well, that's
so if you stop using it, you stop paying, right?
Yeah, you have to. If you stop using it, you shut it off, and they, interestingly, those other surveys had checking boxes and giving priorities, and then that survey program tabulates everything. Here we'd just be asking
open-ended questions.
Yeah, open-ended questions, and we'd be able to see the results. And the benefit would be they could type right into the into the computer.
Which you're describing, right? It doesn't create multiple pages. They don't have to print anything. We get the results immediately as they hit enter. So there's a lot of advantages for us.
Yeah.
Certainly worth $35 to get it that way.
Totally. Mary, you were going to say something?
The South Benson Marina sent out a monkey form questionnaire to the voters at the South Benson Marina. And there were a lot of yes and no answers in it, and a very small space for writing in a comment. It had to be tabulated, as they did tabulate it at any rate. 5 people sat down and tabulated it. It gave all the people in the South Benson Marina, the opportunity to run around, and there were half a dozen of them that wanted to make a lot of trouble, and they were highly successful in doing so. Because they also had the total address of the residents in the South Benson Marina. And it was a mess. And the open-ended, there should be some kind of a short way of saying a couple of short answers, maybe with the open-ended one. But the way you're going to get honest thinking, and if you make the question in such a way that there are some ways of thinking about how to answer it, a little bit. Give a couple of examples of things you might be concerned about or approve of or whatever next to and then have them respond to that. And it still could be open-ended. I don't think you need a monkey thing. I think you can make your own and send it out. But the problem is we don't have a list of all the people in the town of Fairfield. So we might want to do it to the people who use the harbor right now. We do have that list. And send it out and then publish it in various places.
Mary, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have a voice problem. The Board of Ed recently the Parks and Rec Board, a subcommittee from the Parks and Rec Commission, sent out notifications about signing up for special trees on the town green once a month to set it up with lights and promote your particularly well-designed and beloved project that you're working on as a group to improve the lives of children in Fairfield. And it's been a really great success. And they put it on Facebook, the Parks and Rec, I guess, put it in one of their pamphlets that they send out. They got a hold of the heads of some of these community groups and told them that they were doing it. So, for example, we could get a hold of Sasquatch and the other one that's in South Fort. You could get a hold of South Benson. That would be very ugly, I imagine, but you'd get a lot of interesting feedback. You could ask, the first selectman for feedback, whatever. So that's another lengthy way of doing this.
But Mary, if you use this survey form, though, yes, you don't have to send anything to any other than the link to it. You know what I mean? And people don't have to do anything except click on that link and then type in the answers to the questions. And if what we did in the other towns is we also had paper copies for people, right, and put it in certain places, exactly, and they could turn them in. But if we could set it up on the computer, they wouldn't have to print anything out or mail anything or scan it. They just type the answer in.
Hit enter and we get the results they wrote.
This monkey thing has a way of adding up all that stuff?
Well, we're not adding anything. We're
just collecting their words.
How do you tabulate that information?
Well,
they just give us an output of all the things people typed.
Yeah.
Hmm. I'm concerned about that too. I mean, the question is, what are we going to do? So if we get a good response, we could theoretically have several hundred answers.
Right, but
what
you
do
would
we?
see
How
key
do
topics,
we?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the tabulating job.
This is Doug.
Right.
Oh, hey, Doug. Welcome.
Can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yep.
The software that we use to tabulate it will pull forward keywords and sentiment and things like that. So anybody in the group could see all the individual answers and could read them. But I just went through a very similar survey process with a client of ours. But it also will spill out, what gets mentioned most often. Right. It's very easy to tabulate that, and it does it anonymously, not track the name. I mean, we could track it, but it doesn't tie it to names as far as the results go.
So if in one of the questions somebody has a concern, and there are 50 similar concerns, the result would tell you that there are 50 people who are concerned about dredging?
This word was mentioned 53 times. This word was mentioned 1,000 times.
Yeah, so I'm going to give an example. It's probably a poor example, but it's a beverage company that we just did a survey with, and we surveyed thousands of people, in this case, who are customers of the company. And it was a SurveyMonkey product, just so everybody knows. And in this case, we asked them to, give us their favorite cocktails. And first choice, second choice, and it was open-ended. We also asked them to tell us things like what they think of when they think of this brand. You could imagine how open-ended the responses were.
Yeah.
And so then when it tabulates it, it would put it out in a couple of different forms. It would take some words, like I think it was maybe John, but I'm not sure who was just talking, say, in this case, gin and tonic was mentioned 53 times.
Yep.
Or it also does it visually. So, if the word refreshing or quality was mentioned a lot, those words were really large, like in a word cloud. And so it could manifest it a couple of different ways, but it was able to pull forward. In this case, we found that people were drinking, Moscow Mules and vodka tonics and Dark Storms. And there was, 100 other things, but those were the ones that people were drinking. So it'll do that without having to manually tabulate it, although you can pull down a spreadsheet that has each of the individual responses so that we could read it to make sure nothing got lost.
So the ones that Jeff described would be done by people filling out paper. We wouldn't get the tabulation on those, so we'd have to do our best effort to sort of say, okay, adding these paper submitted ones, does that change our result, or is it just confirm what we were already hearing?
I would frankly just pay a high school or college kid to enter them in manually to the other thing and let it tab it alongside the rest.
Yeah.
Another thought, I guess, in going back to the questions that we want to ask. I mean, it's open-ended. This draft, as we had talked about the last meeting. Another approach is to give a number to each of those 4 major initiatives and ask people. We could set it up so which is your highest priority, and which do it that way, which is more
force rank them.
Right? Yeah, more. Or do you? I thought we were thinking that we just let people type in their suggestions or questions and leave it open-ended and see what we get.
Yep.
Because I don't think that we're gonna. If someone says the main priority is to complete the Lower Wharf Improvement Project, or the lowest is the update the mooring rules, I don't think we're going to change. It just gives us a sense of their interest, but it's not going to make us change the approach that we're taking to do all of these things.
Right, and the reason we're listing them is because we want people to know that that's what we're doing. It's
more of it's as much of an outreach to tell people, and then we also want to reference and have the link to our presentation as well.
Right.
So one of the thoughts I had looking at the content, I don't know if we're ready to talk about the content, but it sounds like we're thinking that something like SurveyMonkey or SurveyMonkey would make the most sense for quickly tabulating most of the responses, hopefully. But also I think it's a great idea to have a printed version that can be left in places like the club and other places where people might be interested to fill out by paper, potentially. And to Mary's point,
I think I think we owe it to people who are not computer savvy or who find themselves in a place, who are at your yacht yard fairly often. I mean, if you're there and you can fill it out, great, do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my comment on what, Jeff, you've done that says community forum, I think that it needs to be very clear that this is a survey or a questionnaire that we're doing, and the way it's sort of written right now, you have to get through 3 paragraphs of what the commission is about and the harbor and stuff to get to we're asking for you to complete a survey. So if it were me, I'd be using that next to last paragraph or something like it at the very top of this thing and change the title so it's crystal clear that we're looking for people's input about the harbor. Yeah. And then perhaps some of this background stuff could be added underneath that.
Yeah. Well, if you do the SurveyMonkey, it would be much simpler. You just have the first block would, we could have a photo of the harbor and just like a letter from the commission, saying the purpose of this, and you don't have to go through all the background. And then it goes right into the question. So,
I don't know about how we could link the presentation to a SurveyMonkey survey, so that's a problem with SurveyMonkey.
I think there are ways of getting that presentation out using a different form of technology. I think you can get it out I don't know anything about Facebook, but I bet it's all on Facebook. And also, or some similar thing like that. And I do know that the citizens of Fairfield do get into Facebook all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's exactly the kind of thing. In addition to that, I would strongly recommend that several, I hate to tell Jeff this because it means 10,000 hours of work for him, but 2 or 3 presentations of this whole report in color on boards in the libraries, in the town hall, a few places like that, or maybe at the boatyard also.
That's a great idea.
And pass it around in the various parts of town. I think it's a fantastic presentation.
Well, what we did with the Forestry Committee, Mary, is on the first floor, we could do the same thing. We had sort of like an exhibit of people's photos, and there's room to hang them on the wall on the first floor. But nobody goes in there now. The public doesn't.
You need to go where the public goes. Yeah. The Parks and Rec Hall would be better than the town hall.
Well, we could figure out that separately too, but.
Yeah.
Well, I think that. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, you have 2 things here. First of all, you have so the harbor management priority. Harbor management is doing works hard for the town of Fairfield, and right now they're updating their plan, the harbor management plan, which was approved by the state. Blah blah. Never mind even telling them that. And it's the Harbor Commission, and these are the 4 things that we are focused on. Okay, updating the harbor management plan, dredging the harbor entrance, completing the lower wharf, and updating and fine-tuning the harbor's mooring rules and mooring administration system. Okay, and do you have? And I put that. Do you have, please put any suggestions or questions concerning these priorities, or wish to suggest additional priorities should you wish to do so. All right, and then you go to the next page where you have specific ideas, not such umbrella ideas. Public health, safety, and welfare. That is a biggie in that harbor. I'd have it in one line, boom, room to write comments about it. Another line, enjoying recreational boating. Line, and there's a lot of recreational boating going on in the harbor besides the sailboats and the stink pots. The environmental quality, that's always a concern. Community character and heritage. I'm not sure what that means. I think we could, I know what it means, but I think we could clarify that a little bit. Appropriate access to the harbor, that's a humdinger. And public interest and support. Okay, and those two are humdingers because Southport is considered to be a separate town by many people who live in Fairfield who don't appreciate that. And I'm very sorry to have to be the bearer of bad news, but I sit on the Parks and Rec Commission and I hear it and see it all the time. So but I think those are two different things that you do. And you just give it to them and give them a space underneath it. You can make a note on the bottom. You can write it on a different piece of paper if you want. You don't have room for it, blah, blah, and that's it.
But remember, Mary, the way we're thinking now is not a separate sheet of paper on the survey program that would come up on the computer. If we had you're talking about now having basically a separate question or response opportunity for each of those goals.
This is what you want to hear from them.
Right. So, but what you're suggesting is instead of listing all the goals like that and asking them what do you think about them, you list them separately, and ask what you think or what your suggestions are. So now you'd have 6 separate questions for that on the survey outline.
Well, you'd have you could leave the 4. You could leave the 4 area. The 4 initiatives sitting there in the order that they are in, and then would please write below if there are any of these initiatives that you wish to comment on. Please write your thoughts below, and then you do the same on the other page, but make it clear that public health, safety, and welfare is one thing. And enjoyable recreational is another thing.
Yeah, but don't you see what that's fine. We could do that. But
we can do that.
So now you've got, instead of one for question number 1, instead of 1 space for answers, we're going to provide 4 spaces. So there'll be 4 separate items. And then on number 2,
you may not want to fill out. You may not care. You may not understand what it means to dredge the harbor, so you might ignore that.
Yeah, right. But it's still set up that way. It's still set up as a separate question on the survey form,
right? With
a space for an answer.
Yeah.
So you'd have 4. So now you'd have 4 for number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in the second question of goals you'd have six lines and ask people what they have to say about each one of those.
Right.
And then the last one would just be whatever you want to add.
Yeah.
That's one way of doing it. That's your suggestion. But,
so there'd be 11. So Mary, under your plan, Mary, there'd be 11 questions.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very short number of questions. But it's going to be. You'd have to read them. Do I think that everybody in Fairfield is going to sit down and write an encyclopedia on this? I do not. I think we'll get very few answers actually. I think if we did something like this, we could just make it available to everybody who has a boat in the harbor.
Well, we could. We've got the online mooring system is going to help enormously because we get the people with moorings, we get people who are on the waiting list, we get people who have docked vessels.
We have everybody's email.
We have everybody's email,
so that you can email them and tell them to go to this link and fill out the survey.
Yeah.
Now there are private moorings in the harbor too.
No.
A few, right?
None.
No. None. Are they all permitted?
Every mooring's a town mooring.
No.
And we've got people who are we have information about people who are at the Pequot dock too. So who slipped there.
Yeah, but what about the houses now next to the tide mill? They have docks out in both.
Actually, we have some info. We do have. Ed has done yeoman's work in getting in touch with most of those folks.
Oh, good. Okay,
so,
but those people, are the people who flock too. I mean, you need to make sure you get everybody who has a boat in the harbor, no matter how they got it there.
Well, if they're following our rules, then they would have submitted their information, and it should be in our computer system.
Yes.
Well, so I think we can do that, and I think that going to groups like Sasquatch and HDC, and then getting a link in if the first selectman would put it in her newsletter that that comes out weekly, then we've got a good bit of the world covered.
Absolutely,
right.
Totally agree.
That is, and you've got the important part of the world covered, because the people who really know about the harbor and really care. Oh, in the country club of somebody over there ought to have a input. I certainly wouldn't send it out to half the people in Pequot are also members of the Country Club of Fairfield, but I certainly would have the courtesy to pass it over to the manager of the Country Club of Fairfield or the chairman of their board.
We can get that, but the first thing, Mary, is to get what it is we're going to send to them.
Right.
So we're going to have to. I can lay something out on the Survey Monkey form.
Have you done it before, Jeff?
Okay.
Oh yeah, I did the ones for Norwich and New London.
And the open-ended, could they be unlimited in terms of the size of the open-ended questions?
I forget how they did it, but they weren't long. They weren't real long answers. But most of the answers, except for the last one, were, check a box or attach the priority or which is most important to you. And I think the one, I think I sent those to others, but. I think we have to. I can do that.
If we tell people how many characters they have, if there's some limit, then they can confine their writing to fit the space. So.
Right.
Well, make the space a reasonable. I don't think anybody wants to sit down and write a treatise on this. And if they do, they can write it on their own paper and add it to the thing.
Right, or send it in to us separately.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Just add them at the end, or send it to us in separate.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, we're not interested in.
Doug, you said that the Survey Monkey provided output of the verbatims. Was it the normal free Survey Monkey, or is it a special version of that?
No, this was the one. What we did was, I'm still paying for it. Actually, the town is $35 a month. Yeah. Is what we've been paying.
But the stuff that was reported about the how to output the results on verbatim questions to say what.
Yeah, so we're using, I think, the same subscription as Jeff. I thought it was $30 a month, but it may be $35. That particular one, and in addition to the analysis that SurveyMonkey does just within the platform, you have the ability to export data into Excel. I think it was the CSV file, but it came into Excel by response. And so in that particular case, we pulled all the responses down to an Excel file also.
Okay. And the word
but we do have we were going. I don't know if it's capable in the free version. I assume it's not. We were using or are using the one that's the first level of entry on subscription, and it was a month to month.
Yep.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you have that private fund, not private. You have that fund that you get from the mooring permit fees.
Yep.
It's designed to do things to improve the harbor.
That's
It's a perfect way to spend some of that money.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely, Mary.
And the comments we got, there's only a few that had like offensive language in them, but most of them, you just reading through them, you could get a sense of what people's interests are, and there were some good suggestions in West Haven. I think we had about somewhere between 500 and 600 responses, and in in New London, it's only a few hundred so far that we've received, and I forget what it was in Norwich. So there are not so many responses that someone looking at this at them can't learn something or can't find things of interest that. But so
I would be happy to go through things like that. It work maybe. I'm 87, so my brain isn't working as well as it used to. But and it never did work that well, to put it.
Nonsense, Mary.
I would be happy to sit down with somebody or a couple of somebodies and go through them and pick up what appears to be the theme that comes through on each of these issues.
Right.
I don't think it would be too horrible. It would be kind of interesting, actually.
It'd be very interesting.
So Jeff, how hard would it be to take what you've done here and work it into a SurveyMonkey survey? Because I think if we have that to look at, that would help everybody visualize how this is going to work.
I got to remember how it took each time I did it. I had to figure it out again, but because I'm not as smart as Mary, but we can do this fairly quickly, and then it allows you on the first page to have an introduction, and we can put up on the header. We can have a photo of the harbor, and it'll look good.
I think if we can manage people's expectations about how much time it might take them to do that, or how many questions there are, so that they don't feel like it's overwhelming, that might increase our response rate.
Short answers. Right. We're not interested in an essay. We just want to know quick thoughts about these things.
Right.
Again, talking too much.
I mean, if you have more to say it on another piece of paper. Send a letter to the chairman of the commission, or to Jeff Stedman, of course.
No, not me. Not to me.
Well, if we put the HMC email address somewhere, and tell people that if they've got additional comments, they can do it there. That takes the pressure off.
And also, the address where they can go to the presentation.
Right.
Let me try to see if I can work on this the next few days and have something next week. If you don't mind me doing that.
No.
Jeff, we might think about whether we want. We don't have to decide the date now, but we might want to think about in the heading of the survey when we're looking for responses to be submitted by, because I could imagine people getting to this later and then being upset that we've stopped collecting the data. So if we tell them in advance, it creates a little bit of a sense of urgency.
Give them 2 weeks.
But we don't have to decide the date, but just plan to have some deadline.
Right.
And I think we should say that these are our priorities for 2020 and 2021, since we're
right, because it'll be almost 2021 by the time it gets.
Yeah. I hate to tell you, Kim, but these also have been our priorities for the last 15 years.
I know. Oh, I know. Well, we could say that. We could say, till if we want to, but I think to just say 2020 means like, what happens in 2 months or 3 months?
2021 and leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. Or in the near future.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Doug. Does that make sense? If since you've worked with these more than us.
I think so.
All right. I'll work on this.
Okay.
And
I think you mentioned the presentation, and I think my sense is we're really behind in our. We're not behind in the sense that we're late, but we're not as far along in that planning. And I think we want to go ahead with the questionnaire.
Well, yes.
But we could put if we feel as a group the need to reference the presentation, we have the link to the town to our website and the town website, and maybe for now that ought to be enough.
I think so.
Well, it is an absolutely incredible. I have to confess, I sort of slipped past me when it arrived on my desk in the midst of a million things. But I went over it today, and it is really a comprehensive, good long look at the harbor.
Yep.
Oh, it's great.
it answers almost every kind of question you could think of.
Right.
And I do want to see it around the town somewhere in displays. And I know it's when the library's open, they're an excellent place. And the yacht club, I guess the yacht club could, I don't know, they're busy doing other things, and they won't do anything until the COVID thing is over, too.
Right.
So maybe a year from now, I don't know.
Right.
But I'd like to see it out there for everybody to see.
And in the meantime, though, while we're waiting for people, well, first we got to do it, and then wait for people to respond. We should still be working on, we have the, draft goals that we've done, and we can still start updating sections of the plan, and I've redone some of the maps. So it's not like this questionnaire is, like we said, is a means of sort of informing people and also getting people's input, but it's not going to really it doesn't influence what we can do right now, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
right.
But this will help us as we move along, as we move forward with what do we call it? Revising the plan.
Right. Yeah. But I also think, and that's the reason why I put it as number 4 on the agenda. If the presentation, if a form of the presentation is to be a video presentation, I think it behooves us to begin to think about, who would be, what the format looks like, who would do the talking, and how we, if for want of a better word, how we get it rehearsed, so that when we hire somebody to come in and film it and create a link or however we decide to publicize it, we don't have to spend a lot of time, prepping people or, I don't know, rehearsing, for want of a better word, to get it done.
Jeff, where are the originals? What are they? Are they colored photographs?
Yes, they're all photos we've had over.
I'm looking at the black and white thing that you gave me a long time ago. I did not see the colored one.
So that should have been sent to you in there. What?
Did you make? Well, I have it in black and white. Okay. Could you make slides out of them and do a slideshow with the talk?
Well, that's what's already prepared. The black and white copies are of the slideshow.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a computer slideshow, Mary, so it can be done as print or it can be done as a computerized slideshow.
Could it be a slideshow in the library on a screen?
Yep, can be put on. It can be put on so it just scrolls through repeatedly through every slide, every X number of seconds, if you wanted.
Or you can put it up on a big screen in the auditorium and have a nice talk.
We're not doing.
Well, right, and my point is not that. I mean, we've got the presentation ready to go, but if we're going to chop it up and have people talking the presentation rather than asking people to sit in a big auditorium and read a slide, or have one person presenting each of the slides, I think it would be wise for us to begin to think who would we get for the various segments, which I think we identified the last meeting. The 3 biggies would be the harbor history, the harbor master, and the harbor plan. I mean, who are the people that we would get to do the talking, and how do they have anything else to add? What would the format look like? Just to begin to get that organized, because that certainly is something I suspect we could get done even with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Now,
Tim, I've been thinking a little bit about this, and it's because we're really talking to slides we really like the slides.
Yep.
Or the topics that we want to cover are covered on these slides.
Yep.
I'm wondering if it needs to be video, because if we are showing the slide, you can do sound describing slides without making it video. So it could be see the slides, but there's voices describing what's on the slides at the same time. So So that's a little bit different technology than going to the. You're right that shooting video and then editing video can be complicated, but it's possible we could do this with just showing specific slides and then having people talking about the content of the slides as an audio recording.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this group that goes around the newspaper
Fair
or
TV
it is, goes around to the commission, could they do that?
They can do video.
I don't know whether they could do what Jack is talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking it might be easier for us to do, and people don't have to be filmed video, but that we're just doing
that's a good
audio conversation. It could almost be a talk show. With people talking about the topic. We're all looking at the slide. You don't have to worry about how you look.
Yes.
It's less vulnerable to the practicing issues that you are raising, and it might be easier for us to accomplish since we like the slides anyway. That's what we want people looking at anyway, not the faces so much. Maybe. It's just an idea.
I think it's a very good idea.
I do too. So,
Doug, what do they call that in businesses where they're having a presentation and you're hearing the voices but you're looking at the slides? What is that called?
I don't know. What do you?
Doug, are you
mean
there?
like a webcast or a podcast?
Like a webcast, right? So it almost be because we've got the slides for the webcast already done. So and we could chunk it up into different modules if we wanted, so it's not the whole thing.
Right.
Webinar or something they call it.
Yeah, right, like a webinar. So, but we could have it be as formal or casual in terms of the description of what we're talking about in the slides. But that requires less of this sort of preparation. You still have to prepare, but it's not as much as how do I look? How do I?
Yeah.
But this presentation answers almost all the questions that these people will ask.
Right, but having somebody talk about the history who was there for the history could really bring alive the slide, you know.
Yes.
Well, I have some photographs that might help elucidate some of that too.
Yeah,
Plus,
we'd have to make another slide in the presentation to show those photographs. But that's a good point.
Okay.
My first trip
I'm just thinking about ways that might be less intimidating and also be easier for us to execute.
That's a very good idea.
Yep. And I think everybody in this group sounds like they're pretty knowledgeable, and they could spend a few hours working on this in their spare time, which I'm sure you don't have. But
right. So
let me. Well, again, I'm not.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know the current IT guy in the town hall, but the retired IT person is a friend of mine who's been helping me with some of these things.
Oh, okay.
I might ask him, how you put together the sort of talking presentation that we've talked about now.
It's a webcast, basically, and it could be a recorded webcast, basically, that people could just start to play whenever they feel like seeing it.
And who records? How do you? Well, I don't. We'll figure it out. I wouldn't know how to do that.
You don't got it either. but I think it's got to be easier to do just voice than to do a video shoot.
Yeah, I'll find out about it if you don't.
So do we need to think about? We still need to think about.
Who?
So would we have Jeff? Yeah, Jeff providing the organizational. And then having the knowledgeable person respond to Jeff. Would we have two knowledgeable people talking to each other? I mean, I don't think we need to have an answer, but just in terms of how we envision this to go, wouldn't be. I think it's probably helpful to begin to think about that.
Right.
Well, there's already a fair amount of script next to the photographs, which is also meaningful.
Right.
My recommendation would be to have two people for each segment, not necessarily the same two people for sure, but two people so that if one person forgets to make a point, the other person does, and it seems more like a conversation with two knowledgeable people on the subject.
Right. And it may not even be repeating what's on the slide.
Right. It could be building on the slide, more history, more background.
Yeah.
You just don't want to just read it.
Right.
And then you start talking.
But the slide could cue you to remember to make certain points that are important to the slides too.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Right.
Again, that'll be easier to do if it's voice only.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. Do we have anything left to discuss? If Jeff is going to put together Survey
Can we talk about who the who's might be if you were doing a pair of people on who the harbor master segment and the harbor history? Who would two good people to talk to?
I could be happily begin to think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, if we did harbor master.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think Pat Carroll and Ed Billings.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one.
Now, I forget. Does it tell you about the time of the Indians on this particular?
No.
This begins long after the Indians were there, right?
Right.
1827 we started, Mary.
We started in 1827. Do you think you could get? Do you think if you and I went over and visited Tom Stanky, we could get him to create a paragraph and say it out loud?
Well, I think that's complicating the things a little bit. But,
all right, okay.
But that's not up to me.
No. So if we do the harbor history,
who are the best historians?
Who would some candidates? I mean, I think we have to come up with more than one or two because people may decline.
Back 300 years. Okay, so you really want to, or 200 years for sure, and you really want to get past the first 200 years and get right into the 20th century, I think, or the late 18th century, 19th century, and the early 20th century. The Yacht Club has has two excellent history books, by the way. It talks.
Okay, we need people though. We need people who are. People who can speak about it.
But Mary,
most of those people are dead, but the book itself exists. Are you
right?
One of you is a new member of the Yacht Club, right?
Doug is, yes.
Doug, okay.
Yes,
Did they give you a copy of the history? Did the Yacht Club give you a copy of the history of the Yacht Club?
I'm sure we have it somewhere, but I can't specifically recall it.
But
I have.
I mean, I know we went through the history, and I've been through it so many times. At the club with members, even at the library. But I don't know if I have a specific. Yes, we were mailed something. I just don't know where it is.
It's a thick book, a heavy book. Well, maybe we could. I have a couple of copies of it. This is the problem with not meeting in person, but
I mean, Jeff, it feels like you could be one of the people on harbor history.
It's interesting. I was just talking with a fellow at the Connecticut State Library this morning, not dropping names and stuff, but about the history of the navigation projects, or the navigation project in Southport, which I think is one of the most fascinating parts of this, because the authorization goes back to the 1820s. And I believe, and I had the list from the Corps of Engineers, that the authorization of the jetty and the wall is the third navigation project authorized in Connecticut by the federal government. And it's like the sixth or the seventh, and I got the list of all of the Corps sent of all of the navigation projects in New England. And there's one in New Hampshire, and I think two in Maine that are earlier than 1829. So that the history of building those improvements and the purpose of building the jetty was to stop sand from encroaching into the harbor.
200 years later, we have the same problem.
And now we have the same problem. And then you have, I think there's a famous quote somewhere that I forget where I just wrote it, but at a certain time there was more shipping owned in Southport per capita than any other port between New York and Boston. I forget. It's in this big book that I just from 1836 that I just made a copy of, 600 pages of. So it's very interesting. And then the maritime commerce, and then in the early part of the 1900s, the federal government thought of abandoning the navigation project because of the decline in waterborne commerce. But instead, in I think it was 1935, they reauthorized the project specifically to serve recreational boating. So the history is and then of course the country club was created in 1914, 1916, and that was created with material dredged from the harbor as well as offshore. So they
had to have separated they had the wall that separated the two mouths of the river, right? Before the wall showed up.
Oh yeah, the wall, Mary, was meant to what they call train, TRAIN, the flow of the Mill River into where the harbor is, rather than spreading it out into what was all the wetlands to the east.
Yes, so then those wetlands are now the golf course, and you will notice two large ponds in them, which are saltwater ponds.
But the other thing that I don't know much about is the history of the yacht club, and I forget when the year was, but initially the yacht club had an agreement with the town to manage what's now the town boatyard for the public, and then that agreement was whatever you want to call it.
Then they turned it over to Howard Burr, and that's
yes.
problem.
So the but we could go off on to talk about this for a long time.
One could also make up a Gilbert and Sullivan fast song, only a poem, and just rip through it in about 5 minutes.
Maybe.
So, but Jeff, if you were going to have a conversation with someone about the harbor history, who would you imagine doing it with? Because I think that's the
right.
Joe Reynes knows a lot about it. Cheryl has.
We can talk about this, but there was the librarian one of the librarians at the Pequot Library did a very nice presentation on the history of Southport, and I was going to talk with her before all the virus stuff started, and then they shared some of the photos that we put in here, and they had a very interesting timeline of the development of Southport. Remember that, Mary? It was on the wall inside.
I remember the pictures. I don't remember going to the talk.
But that's not the. There must be somebody from the yacht club that would be able to speak about the history of the.
Most of those people are long gone.
Yeah.
Well, we might be able to scrape it up.
Maybe Jim Bradley could suggest somebody.
I think Jim could.
Jim Bradley might be able to, but I'm not. Yeah. I'm being facetious in a way, but there was an enormous amount of stuff that went on for 200 years, but we don't want to dwell on that too much.
We could. Then people would be listening to it for all day, Mary.
No, I'm not kidding when I say
I know you are.
A short way of doing it, a short, almost funny way of doing it, by bringing it right up. We want to get to the 19th century, and so this is where we do want you to have a bird's eye glimpse of what came before.
But we remember
dates and what happened.
We only have 3 slides on the history. And then we go into the harbor management plan, and the authorities and the harbor and the harbor master, and
all right. Do you want to include something about the history?
Well, I think we're going to have.
They're different presentations. These are going to be different recordings broken up, right? We talked about breaking these up into one that just talks about the role of the harbor master, another one that talks about the harbor history, and a third little conversation that talks about the harbor management plan.
Yeah. Doug, you were going to say something?
We were talking just now about the second of the 3, and we're thinking Jeff and maybe Jim Bradley or somebody else who might have the piece on that Jeff doesn't know about, which is the PYC history.
I think
people are going to get bored if these go on too long, so I would think the absolute maximum would be half an hour for these and probably 20 minutes.
I would say 10
minutes. It would have to be fairly punchy.
I think 20 minutes is too long, personally. I agree with somebody who just said 10 minutes. And I think as far as the history goes, one of the things that we should do is try and keep this on task to giving the information that's needed for somebody to give input on what they want for our updating of the plan. Mm-hmm. I think we could create some resources if somebody wants to, information to go get more history or other things. Mm-hmm. But I think if we burden this with things like the history and everything else, it's going to get meander off topic and take a long time and not get the results.
I don't think this has nothing to do with the questionnaire. That's a whole different. Right. This was other work related to our planning work, not related to this data gathering that we talked about. Right?
Well, yes. So far we have suggestions for the Harbor Master segment, one 15, 10, 20-minute segment, Pat Carroll and Ed Billings. For the harbor history, we have suggestions of Joe Rainis, the librarian at PYC, at Pequot, not PYC, Pequot Library, Joe Rainis and Jeff Stedman. And then for the harbor plan, for segment number 3, also 10 minutes or so, I think Jim Bradley.
That's where Jim Bradley should be talking.
Yeah, I think that's where Jim would shine, but he needs somebody to chat with.
I can do that with him.
Okay, so Jim and Mary.
I'll sit and listen. That's what I'll do, but I'll...
Well,
no, he talks
Mary,
a lot, too.
You don't want it to be just a presentation on the plan from the perspective of the yacht club. You know, it's from the perspective of the town.
Right.
The yacht club is a partner in the whole thing and had
Jim was
role.
part of a committee that did it. I think everybody else who was on that original committee is now dead. But we could find. We could see if we could find.
No, don't.
Is there anybody else though that just let's put together a list here. Is there anybody else that in case Jim says no, is there anybody else that would be?
Yeah, this isn't all just history. This one would be more about what is the plan, what's the purpose of the plan, why do we have a plan, why do we need to update the plan. So this is more
another place we could begin this talk is that there became a problem in the harbor, or we can start it with the Sullivan line.
Well,
we don't need to say it's here, all right? We have a country club and we have a harbor and we have boats, and we can start it with something short. After all the other building has gone on, we start with the Sullivan line and the boatyard and the yacht club.
Since I started in 1987, I could do the harbor management plan, and someone else could talk about the history. But that's up to you. But,
or both. And, I mean, honestly, Jeff,
or both,
I could see you doing. There's nothing the matter with you being in both of them. If you're the
I don't want to talk too much.
Person to do them.
But
they're going to be completely separate events and links, and So I guess we on the harbor history, that really is. Maybe we would want another person if we have Joe, who was down at Yee Yacht Yard.
Joe was hanging around at the Yee Yacht Yard. I don't know whether he's a speaker type of person or not. He knows a lot about it. He built up the, but it's a pretty esoteric part of the yacht club. Now it is. I mean, in the past, you could do a whole segment on the Yee Yacht Yard and what happened there over the years, too.
Well, and one of the suggestions from Cheryl, who couldn't be here, was to create a small segment on community sailing, which I think would be very interesting and useful, too, to
I would like to carry that
perspective.
suggestion one step further and suggest that someone from community sailing be sitting on this subcommittee.
And remember, we're getting complicated, Mary.
I know, but all
you're
right.
Overly complicating this stuff.
All right. I always do that. I know.
But community sailing, I can talk to Steve Ferguson, and we can distribute. We can get community sailing. I'm sure Steve would notify all the members to respond to our questionnaire, and we have a reference to community sailing in the as part of the current, when someone describes the current uses of the harbor, and that would come out there.
Well, I'm quite sure that the chairman of the community sailing group has a record of all the members of community sailing, and so they could get it the same way the rest of the people are getting it.
Good. Okay. All right, so it's almost 4 o'clock. Anything else?
Yes, I have two things, and I'm sorry
to please, go ahead.
Blabbering on here. Before the virus problem started, I talked with Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, one of the state reps from Fairfield, and I had been talking with her about some of the issues having to do with the Connecticut Port Authority and the Blue Plan, and we talked about the possibility of introducing legislation next year to clarify parts of the state statute, the Connecticut Harbor Management Act, which authorizes municipal harbor management commissions, and specifically to make clear. And Mary, remember, we wrote years ago with the Harbor Management Association a proposed amendment to that section, And that section concerns the recommendations of a Harbor Management Commission. And it's been subject to some confusion. But the way that it's understood now is that a recommendation of the Harbor Management Commission, pursuant to the plan, pursuant to the policies of the plan, and supported by the plan, is binding on state officials making decisions.
Unless they can show cause, right?
Unless they show cause.
Right.
Now, the DEP, there's been an argument going back a number of years where the DEP has said, no, we don't interpret it that way. It has to be a recommendation in the plan, basically set out ahead of time that's binding.
Yeah.
Subsequently, they've agreed to the first type of language that I talked about in plans that have just been approved, but we thought it would be useful and perhaps beneficial to clarify that section. And Ms. McCarthy-Vahey said she would be happy to talk with us about that. So I think we might want to, communicate with her again prior to the next legislative session. So maybe the chair and someone else we could talk with her. And then the other thing, I didn't follow up on this, but the town is updating the plan of conservation and development of the town. And I had sent some stuff. I believe it's Emmeline, I forget her last name. Harris,
yeah.
Is that? Yeah.
Harris.
And we should talk with her. Maybe if you don't mind, I'll send the presentation on the harbor to her and ask if we could talk with her to make sure that the plan of conservation and development properly references the harbor management plan.
Great.
Because in some ways the harbor management plan is a more significant document than the plan of conservation and development because it's approved by the state as well as the RTM, and it has that clause about the binding recommendations. So if you don't mind, I'll send her the presentation and ask if maybe we could have a discussion with her at an appropriate time.
I think that would be great. I think that's a good idea, and let's do it. Let's get on everybody's radar.
All right.
Well, I've worked with Christine a little bit, and I'd be happy to go with you. She knows who I am. And I've certainly worked with the DEP enough to know what Jeff is talking about.
Right.
Right. Can I just ask Jeff, I guess, mostly here, can we review the decision we just made in terms of today? So that questionnaire we talked about, looking at putting it into SurveyMonkey, that seems like that's priority one, right? Because we need to get that feedback in the next coming month or two to inform and to reinforce the work that we're doing around the plan. Mm-hmm. The subsequent conversation that we had about whether we do it by some kind of a webcast versus video, et cetera, that is secondary? Are we saying that the urgent thing is to get the questionnaire whipped together and ready to be sent out to people, or inviting people to it?
What do the committee members think? That's my feeling. Survey first, webinar, conversation, segments, harbor master, harbor plan, and harbor history are secondary.
Nice to be done by the end of the year if we can get to them. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The survey requires several fairly significant bits of work after it gets sent out and returned, too.
Right.
I'm just about getting it sent out.
It's not a one-day
more
job.
urgent priority in this process.
Right. And the webinar is the whipped cream.
Right. And that was sort of, I think, where Doug was going on this. Let's not hold things up for that.
No, I totally agree.
But I like the way you're doing, Kim, of bringing it up so you start thinking ahead too.
Well, we've all got good ideas, and I just would hate not to be planning ahead so that when the time comes, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
So next week at the mooring committee meeting, we can queue up Ed to start thinking about promoting people filling out this SurveyMonkey survey using the online mooring system as soon as it's ready to go out.
Right.
We can talk.
Right, and we can do that on Wednesday or so.
Right, next week and get him ready to think about that. Yeah.
So if we think about, Jeff, if you're going to be working on the SurveyMonkey formatting, Is a 2-week window too soon for people to meet again?
No.
Well,
Doug, are you good?
I don't
Mary,
think so.
Doug?
What's 2 weeks? What's happening 2 weeks from now?
That'll be Friday. I'm asking, is that too soon? Are people available if we wanted to do like Friday the 2nd?
Yeah. Yes, that's good. Well, not speaking for others, but to have a mock-up of that Survey Monkey or the survey form.
Jeff, educate me. So when you put something into Survey Monkey, can you, without making the survey active, send invites for us to look at a non-active survey so we could literally see how it would look for somebody filling it out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Again, I have to remember how he did it.
Yeah, I've
and
never
Doug would
done
know,
it.
but I'm sure because when we did it in the other towns, we all reviewed it before it went out, so that there was.
Okay, so that would be optimal if we could just before the meeting get a chance to look at it and then talk to you about it on the meeting.
Yeah.
So does that work for everybody?
Yep.
So hopefully we would have a vision of what the thing looks like on the 2nd of October, and we'd meet again. Is 3 a good time?
Yep.
Yep. Yes.
3 o'clock. Okay.
Yes.
Hopefully I will send myself a reminder on early in the week to make sure I get the agenda filed down at Town Hall, and
Tell me the date again.
I'm sorry.
Tell
October
me the date
2.
in October.
It's October 2. It's Friday, October 2nd.
2. Okay. Yep.
3 o'clock. Look at the Survey Monkey. Continue to think about who we could get to talk about the harbor plan, the harbor history, and the harbor master. We've got a list. We might need more folks. And Jeff, you were going to talk to your friend who was the former.
Yep.
And I think what I'll do is shoot Dave Kelly an email and just see what, if anything, he could what the town resources are vis-a-vis webinars and that kind of thing.
And also, if it would be okay for us to include a link to a Survey Monkey survey on the town site.
Okay.
That's yet another way to distribute it, right?
Yeah.
There's many different ways to get people to go fill out the survey.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Any questions from anybody?
I have a question. I thought I heard somebody click on to the meeting quite a ways into it. Is that person still there?
I don't know. I mean, the committee members who were present were you and Jeff and Jack and me and Doug. You might have heard somebody from the public.
I heard somebody come on and not say anything. That's all right. Okay.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
And they have not. I don't know that any more than you do. So.
Yep. Okay.
But that's their right to do, Mary. Anybody can.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I know. But if it was a member of the commission, of the committee, you'd want to know who they were, right?
Yep.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
And he wouldn't have wanted to interrupt what was going on.
Right. Very polite. Mm-hmm. Okay, folks, this was great. Have a good weekend, and we will reconvene on October 2 at 3 o'clock. Good work.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.